David stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his collar for the third time. He couldn't remember the last time he'd worn a button-down shirt that wasn't for a parent-teacher conference. The reflection staring back at him looked tired, older than his 34 years. Dark circles under his eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights and early mornings packing school lunches. From the living room, he could hear his 6-year-old daughter Lily laughing at something on TV. That sound, her laugh, was the only thing that had kept him going for the past 3 years. 3 years since cancer had taken his wife. 3 years of learning to braid hair through YouTube videos, of burning dinners, of crying alone in the shower so Lily wouldn't see. 3 years of being both mom and dad, and feeling like he was failing at both. Dating? The word felt foreign to him now. Ridiculous, even. Who had time for dating when there were soccer practices to drive to, spelling tests to study for, and monsters under the bed that needed checking every single night? But his sister Rebecca had other ideas. She'd been on his case for months, showing up at his door with that determined look in her eyes, the one that meant she wasn't taking no for an answer. Last week, she'd cornered him at their parents' house during Sunday dinner. "David, you need to get out there," she'd said, blocking his path to the coffee maker like some kind of relationship intervention bouncer. "It's been 3 years. You're not betraying anyone by having dinner with someone." "I'm fine," he'd insisted, trying to sidestep her. "Lily needs me. Work is crazy. I don't have time for this. That's always your excuse." Rebecca had fired back. "Lily needs a father who's happy, not just present. And don't give me that look. I loved Katie too. She was my best friend before she was your wife, remember? And she would want you to live, not just exist." The words had stung because they were true. Katie had made him promise, during those final weeks in the hospital, that he wouldn't shut down, that he'd find happiness again. He'd agreed, holding her hand, thinking it was an impossible promise. How could he even think about someone else when his whole world was falling apart? Now, 3 years later, Rebecca had finally made good on her threats. She'd shown up at his door that Friday evening, with Lily's overnight bag already packed, and a grin that made David's stomach drop. "Surprise! Lily's having a sleepover at Aunt Rebecca's house tonight," she'd announced, breezing past him into the living room. "What? No, wait. I didn't agree to this," David had protested, following her. "Daddy, I'm going to Aunt Rebecca's." Lily had squealed, already putting on her shoes. She said, "We can make cookies and watch movies." Rebecca had turned to him, her expression softening. "David, I've set you up with someone. Tonight, 7 o'clock at Angelo's. Her name is Claire. She's a nurse, she's kind, and she knows your situation. All you have to do is show up and have one dinner. That's it. No commitment, no pressure. Just 2 adults having a meal." "Rebecca, I can't just..." "Yes, you can. Look at yourself. When was the last time you did something for you? When was the last time you had a conversation with an adult that didn't involve school supplies or work deadlines?" She'd placed her hand on his arm. "One dinner. If it's awful, you never have to do it again, and I'll stop bothering you. Deal?" And just like that, before he could form a proper argument, Rebecca had whisked Lily out the door, leaving him standing in his living room in sweatpants, staring at a piece of paper with the restaurant's address scribbled on it. Now, hours later, David was in his car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. He was a grown man, a father, a high school history teacher who gave presentations to auditoriums full of teenagers without breaking a sweat. Why was he so nervous about dinner? Because it felt like stepping off a cliff. That's why. Because sitting across from someone new felt like admitting Katie was really gone. Because what if he forgot how to do this? What if he said something stupid? What if this woman expected something he couldn't give? Angelo's was a small Italian place downtown. the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. David had taken Katie here on their anniversary once. Years ago. The memory hit him as soon as he walked through the door, and he almost turned around and left. But then he saw her. A woman sitting alone at a corner table, nervously adjusting her napkin. She had shoulder-length dark hair and was wearing a simple blue dress. She looked up, caught his eye, and offered a small, uncertain smile. That had to be Claire. David's feet felt like concrete as he walked toward the table. His mind raced through a dozen escape plans. He could fake a work emergency, say his daughter was sick, pretend he was at the wrong restaurant. Claire stood as he approached, and he noticed she looked just as nervous as he felt. There was something comforting about that. "Hi, you must be David," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "I'm Claire." "Yeah, hi," David managed, suddenly forgetting how human interaction worked. "Sorry. I'm a little out of practice with this whole thing." "Me too, honestly," Claire said, with a small laugh that seemed to ease some of the tension. They both sat down, and an awkward silence settled over the table. David was about to launch into some generic small talk when Claire spoke again, her tone suddenly more serious. "Look, before we start, I need to say something," she began, meeting his eyes directly. "Your sister told me about Lily, about your wife. I just want you to know that I'm not here to replace anyone or to step into some role you're not ready for. I'm just here to meet you. That's all. No expectations, no pressure, just two people having dinner." David felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. He'd been bracing himself for questions, for awkward sympathy, for someone trying too hard or not understanding at all. But this simple acknowledgement of his reality, without judgment or agenda, he sat back in his chair, and for the first time since Rebecca had ambushed him, he felt the tight knot in his chest loosen just a little. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Quote, I prom." Quote. Claire smiled, a genuine one this time. "I think I might have some idea, actually." And just like that, with those first few words, something shifted. The evening David had been dreading suddenly felt a little less terrifying. He picked up his menu, and for the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Rebecca had been right after all. The waiter approached their table, and David realized he was actually curious to know more about the woman sitting across from him. The woman whose first words had somehow managed to crack open a door he'd thought was permanently sealed shut. The waiter had come and gone, taking their orders while David tried to remember how normal conversation was supposed to work. He'd spent the last 3 years talking about cartoon characters, homework assignments, and whether vegetables counted as real food in his daughter's worldview. Adult conversation felt like a foreign language he'd once been fluent in but had somehow forgotten. Claire saved him from his own awkwardness. "So, your sister mentioned you're a teacher?" she asked, her tone genuinely curious, not just filling silence. "Yeah, high school history," David replied, grateful for the easy topic. "I keep telling myself I'll write a book someday about all the creative excuses students come up with for missing homework. But who has the time?" Claire laughed. And it was a real laugh, not polite or forced. "I work with kids too, in a way. I'm a pediatric nurse at County General, though my patients usually can't talk back, which is probably easier than teenagers." "Don't be so sure," David said, feeling himself relax slightly. "A crying baby and a teenager who thinks you've ruined their life aren't that different. Trust me." As they talked, David learned that Claire had grown up in the city, the youngest of 3 siblings. Her father had raised her and her brothers alone after her mother left when she was 7. She didn't say it with bitterness, just stated it as fact, but David heard the weight behind those words. The understanding of what it meant to watch a parent carry everything alone. "That's why I wanted to say what I said earlier," Claire continued, stirring her water with her straw. "I watched my dad struggle with dating after my mom left. Every woman who came around either tried too hard to be our new mom, or they acted like we didn't exist. Neither worked. I just remember wishing someone would see him as a person first, not just as a package deal. David felt something crack open inside his chest. That's exactly it, he said, leaning forward. Everyone means well, but they either want to fix everything or they tell me it's time to move on, like there's some expiration date on grief. And the worst part is feeling guilty for even considering this. Like I'm betraying Katie by sitting here with you. Claire nodded slowly. Grief isn't something you move on from, it's something you carry with you. It changes shape, gets lighter some days, heavier on others, but it doesn't just disappear because time passes. Their food arrived, but neither of them seemed to notice right away. David was too busy processing the fact that someone actually understood, not in a theoretical, sympathetic way, but in a real, lived experience way. Can I ask you something? Claire said after a moment. And you can totally tell me if it's too personal. Go ahead, David said, surprised to find that he meant it. What was the hardest part? I mean, besides the obvious. What's the thing that caught you off guard? David took a breath, considering the question. Nobody had asked him that before. They asked how he was doing, how Lily was adjusting, if he needed anything. But nobody asked about the unexpected parts, the little moments, he said finally. Everyone prepared me for the big stuff, you know? The first birthday without her. The holidays. The anniversary. Those were brutal, but I saw them coming. It's the random Tuesday afternoon when Lily does something funny, and I turn to tell Katie about it, and she's not there. Or when I'm at the grocery store, and I almost buy her favorite ice cream out of habit. Those moments hit like a truck. Claire's eyes glistened slightly. My dad used to set 4 plates at dinner for months after my mom left. He'd catch himself halfway through and just stand there, holding that extra plate. I was just a kid. But I remember thinking how unfair it was. That he had to hurt like that. And still, make us breakfast the next morning. That's exactly what nobody tells you, David said, his voice thick. You don't get to fall apart. Not really. Because there's a 6-year-old who needs lunch packed, and permission slips signed, and someone to tell her that everything's going to be okay, even when you have no idea if that's true. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both picking at their pasta. Then Claire smiled, deliberately shifting the mood. Okay. Enough heavy stuff. Tell me something good. What's Lily like? David's whole face transformed when he talked about his daughter. He told Claire about Lily's current obsession with dinosaurs, how she insisted on wearing her Velociraptor t-shirt at least 3 times a week. He told her about the time Lily tried to make him breakfast in bed and accidentally used salt instead of sugar in the pancakes, and how he ate every bite while she watched proudly. He told her about Lily's gap-toothed smile and her habit of asking why about everything, even when there was no good answer. Claire listened intently, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. She didn't do that thing some people did where they pretended to be interested, but were clearly waiting for their turn to talk. She was genuinely present. She sounds amazing, Claire said warmly. The dinosaur thing is great. I had a patient last week, a 4-year-old boy who insisted that his broken arm was from fighting a T-Rex. Wouldn't let anyone convince him otherwise. David laughed. What did you tell him? I told him he was incredibly brave to fight a T-Rex and win. But maybe next time he should try negotiating first, Claire said with a grin. His mom was mortified. He'd actually fallen off a jungle gym. They talked about her work at the hospital, the funny and heartbreaking moments that came with caring for sick kids. Claire told him about the thank you drawings that covered her locker, the parents who brought her coffee just to say she'd made a difference, and the nights she went home and cried because medicine couldn't fix everything. Why pediatrics? David asked. That seems like it would be the hardest specialty. Because kids are honest, Claire said simply. They tell you when something hurts. They don't hide behind walls or pretend everything's fine when it isn't. And when they smile, when they get better and go home, it's the best feeling in the world. Worth all the hard days. David checked his watch, and was shocked to see that 2 hours had passed. It felt like 20 minutes. The restaurant had filled up and started to empty again. And he'd barely noticed. When was the last time he'd lost track of time like this? I should probably go, he said reluctantly. Rebecca's probably wondering if I'm going to make her keep Lily all weekend. Claire smiled as they walked toward the parking lot. The night air was cool, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. David's car was parked next to hers, which seemed like either cosmic coincidence or Rebecca's meddling. Probably both. David, Claire said as they reached their cars. I had a really good time tonight. I know this probably wasn't what you wanted to do tonight, but I'm glad you showed up. Me too, David admitted, and he meant it. I didn't think I would be, but I am. Claire hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. This has my number on it. I'd like to see you again, but only if you want to. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other. You can call me, or not. Either way, I'm glad we met. David took the card, his fingers brushing hers briefly. I'll call you, he heard himself say. I mean, if that's okay. Maybe we could get coffee sometime? I'd like that, Claire said, her smile reaching her eyes. As David drove home that night, the business card sitting on his passenger seat, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. It was small, cautious, like a plant pushing through concrete, but it was there. And for the first time since Katie died, David didn't feel guilty for feeling it. David stared at his phone for what felt like the 100th time that week. Claire's business card was tucked into his wallet, the edges already slightly worn from him taking it out and putting it back. He'd picked up his phone to call her at least a dozen times, then chickened out just as many. It had been 5 days since their dinner at Angelo's. 5 days of replaying their conversation in his head, of second-guessing everything, of wondering if he'd imagined the connection between them. What if she'd just been polite? What if she'd given him her number out of pity? What if he was reading too much into one good evening? Daddy, you're doing it again, Lily said from the kitchen table, where she was coloring a picture of what appeared to be a purple triceratops wearing a crown. Doing what, sweetie? David asked, setting his phone down. Making your thinking face. The one where you look like you ate something yucky, but you're trying not to say anything. David couldn't help but laugh. 6-year-olds had a way of cutting through everything with brutal honesty. I'm just trying to figure something out, that's all. Is it about that lady Aunt Rebecca told me about? Lily asked, not looking up from her coloring. David nearly dropped his coffee mug. What did Aunt Rebecca tell you? She said you went to dinner with a nice lady and that maybe you'd be smiling more, Lily said matter-of-factly, switching to a green crayon. Are you smiling more? I can't really tell. David sat down next to his daughter, marveling at how nothing got past her. Would that be okay with you? If I had dinner with someone? Lily finally looked up, her expression serious in that way kids get when they're thinking about something important. Is she nice? Very nice, David said honestly. Does she like dinosaurs? I don't know. I didn't ask her. Lily considered this, then shrugged. Well, if she's nice and you like her, then it's okay. But you should find out about the dinosaurs. That's important. David pulled his daughter into a hug, amazed at how simple she could make complicated things seem. You're pretty smart. You know that? I know, Lily said, squirming out of the hug to get back to her drawing. Now call her. You're being weird. So that evening, after Lily was in bed, David finally worked up the courage to dial Claire's number. His heart hammered in his chest as it rang, once, twice, 3 times. Maybe she wouldn't answer. Maybe that would be easier. Hello? Claire's voice came through, slightly breathless. Hi, it's David. From dinner last week? Is this a bad time? David, no, not at all. I just got home from a shift. Give me 1 second. He heard rustling, then a door closing. Okay. I'm good. I was hoping you'd call. The knot in David's stomach loosened. You were? Of course. I meant what I said. I had a really good time. They talked for almost an hour. And it felt as easy as their dinner had. Claire told him about a 3-year-old patient who decorated her cast with stickers of every Disney princess. David told her about the student who'd tried to argue that Vikings discovered America in his history class, using a reality TV show as his source. So, David said, finally getting to the point, I was wondering if you'd want to get coffee sometime. There's a place near the school that makes pretty decent lattes. I'd love that, Claire said, and David could hear the smile in her voice. When were you thinking? They settled on Saturday morning. David would drop Lily off at soccer practice and meet Claire at the coffee shop. It felt manageable. Low pressure. Just 2 people having coffee. Nothing more complicated than that. Over the next 3 weeks, David and Claire fell into an easy rhythm. Coffee on Saturdays became their thing. Sometimes they'd walk through the park afterward, talking about everything and nothing. Claire told him about growing up with 2 older brothers who'd taught her how to throw a punch and change a tire. David told her about his dreams of writing a historical novel someday. If he ever found the time, they texted throughout the week, nothing heavy, just checking in. Claire would send him funny pictures from the hospital, kids' drawings or silly faces her young patients made. David would share the ridiculous questions his students asked, like whether Napoleon was actually short or if that was just propaganda. But David was careful. He didn't introduce Claire to Lily. He kept that part of his life separate, protected. It was that he couldn't bear the thought of Lily getting attached to someone who might not stick around. He'd seen it happen with his co-workers' kids after his divorce. The confusion, the hurt, the endless questions about why someone they'd grown to care about had disappeared. Claire never pushed. She asked about Lily often, listened to David's stories about soccer games and science projects and the epic battle they'd had over bedtime the night before. But she never said things like, I'd love to meet her. Or, when do I get to see her? She understood that there was a wall there, and she respected it. One evening, about a month after their first date, David and Claire were sitting on a bench by the lake. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. They'd just finished dinner at a small Thai place Claire had recommended, and neither of them seemed ready for the evening to end. Can I tell you something? David said, watching a family of ducks glide across the water. Always, Claire replied. I'm terrified, he admitted. Of this, of us, of what happens next. I haven't felt this way about anyone since Katie, and I don't know what to do with that. Part of me feels like I'm betraying her memory, even though I know that's not rational. And the other part of me is scared that I'm going to mess this up, or that something's going to happen and Lily's going to get hurt. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she took his hand. Her fingers were warm against his. You want to know what I'm terrified of? David looked at her, surprised. You're scared too? Of course I am. David, I'm falling for a man who comes with the most important responsibility in the world. A man whose heart has already been broken in the worst way possible. A man who has every reason to keep his walls up. And I'm scared that no matter how patient I am, no matter how much I care about you and Lily, it might not be enough. Claire, but here's the thing, she continued, her eyes meeting his. If we weren't scared, it would mean we didn't care enough to worry about getting it wrong. And I'd rather be terrified and trying than safe and alone. David felt something shift in his chest, like a door he'd been holding shut was finally opening. I'm falling for you too, he said quietly. And that scares me more than anything. Good, Claire said with a small smile. We can be scared together. They sat in silence for a while, hands intertwined, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. David thought about Lily, about the conversation they'd had weeks ago at the kitchen table, about how she'd said it was okay if he liked someone, as long as they were nice. Claire, David said, the words coming out before he could second-guess them. Lily has a soccer game next Saturday. Not as anything official, just as my friend. I think it's time. Claire squeezed his hand. No, David admitted with a nervous laugh. But I want you to meet her. And I think she'd like you. She'll probably interrogate you about dinosaurs within the first 5 minutes. Just warning you. I can handle that, Claire said. David's heart swelled. The fact that she'd been preparing for this possibility, that she'd cared enough to learn about his daughter's interests without even being asked, told him everything he needed to know. As they walked back to their cars, David felt the weight of 3 years of grief and fear lifting just slightly. He wasn't betraying Katie's memory by moving forward. He was honoring the life she'd wanted for him and Lily. A life that included love and hope and maybe even happiness again. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made David check his watch every 5 minutes. He'd barely slept the night before, running through every possible scenario in his head. What if Lily didn't like Claire? What if Claire said something wrong? What if this whole thing was a huge mistake? Lily was oblivious to his anxiety, bouncing around the kitchen in her soccer uniform, trying to eat cereal, while simultaneously demonstrating her new dribbling technique with an imaginary ball. "Lily, sit down and eat," David said for the 3rd time, watching milk slosh dangerously close to the edge of her bowl. "We need to leave in 20 minutes. Is your friend coming to my game?" Lily asked, finally sitting down but swinging her legs under the table. David's stomach did a flip. "Yeah, she is. Her name is Claire. Is that okay?" Lily shrugged, spooning cereal into her mouth. "I'm not sure," David admitted. "But I think she's excited to meet you." "Okay," Lily said simply, as if meeting her dad's friend was the most normal thing in the world. Kids had a way of making everything seem less complicated than adults made it. The soccer field was already busy when they arrived. Parents setting up folding chairs along the sidelines. Kids warming up with their teams. David helped Lily with her shin guards and cleats, his hands shaking slightly as he tied her laces. "Daddy, you're being weird again," Lily observed, pulling her leg back to test the tightness of her shoe. "Sorry, kiddo. Just want to make sure you're ready." "I'm always ready," Lily declared with the confidence only a 6-year-old could have. She ran off to join her teammates, her ponytail swinging behind her. David found a spot along the sideline and set up his chair, checking his phone every few seconds. Claire had texted that she was on her way. He scanned the parking lot repeatedly. Then he saw her. Claire was walking across the field, wearing jeans and a casual sweater. Her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was carrying a small bag. And when she spotted David, she waved and smiled. But he could see the nervousness in her eyes too, the way she kept adjusting the strap on her shoulder. "Hey," she said, as she reached him, and her voice had that same slightly breathless quality it had during their first phone call. "Hey," David replied, resisting the urge to hug her. He didn't know what the rules were for this situation. "Thanks for coming. I'm glad you're here." "Me too. Which one is Lily?" David pointed to where Lily was practicing with her team, number 7, on her bright yellow jersey. The one currently trying to convince her coach that velociraptors would make better goalies than humans. Claire laughed, and some of the tension in David's shoulders eased. They sat down just as the game started, and Claire cheered enthusiastically whenever Lily's team got the ball. David found himself watching Claire as much as he watched the game, noticing how genuine her interest seemed, how she wasn't just going through the motions. At halftime, Lily came running over, red-faced and sweaty, her hair escaping from her ponytail in every direction. "Daddy, did you see? I almost scored," she said, breathless with excitement. "I saw." "Sweetheart, you're doing great," David said, then took a breath. "Lily, this is my friend Claire. Claire, this is Lily." Claire crouched down so she was at Lily's eye level, not towering over her like most adults did. "That was an amazing kick you had in the first half." Lily looked Claire up and down with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for suspicious vegetables on her dinner plate. "Do you like soccer?" One. I do. I played when I was your age, actually." I wasn't very good, though. I spent most of my time picking dandelions in the outfield. Lily giggled at that. That's silly. You can't win games if you're picking flowers. You're absolutely right. That's probably why we lost a lot, Claire said with a smile. Then she added, I heard you really like dinosaurs. Lily's eyes lit up the way they always did when someone mentioned her favorite topic. I love dinosaurs. Do you know about them? I know a little bit. What's your favorite? And just like that, Lily launched into an enthusiastic explanation about velociraptors, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. Claire listened intently, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention, not just humoring a kid. When the whistle blew for the second half, Lily started to run back to her team, then stopped and turned around. Claire, are you going to stay for the whole game? If that's okay with you, Claire said. Lily thought about it for a second, then nodded. Okay. Watch number 7. That's me. Then, she ran off, leaving David and Claire alone again. That went well, Claire said, settling back into her chair. She likes you, David said, feeling relief wash over him. Trust me. If she didn't, you'd know. She once told my principal that his tie looked like a sad rainbow. Claire laughed. She's wonderful, David. Really. The second half was more intense than the first. Lily's team was down by 1 goal, and David could see his daughter's determination on her face. She was playing harder, running faster, completely focused on the game. Then, with just minutes left, Lily got the ball. She dribbled past one defender, then another, her little legs pumping as hard as they could. David was on his feet without realizing it, Claire right beside him. Lily took the shot, and the ball sailed past the goalie's outstretched hands and into the net. Yes, David shouted, jumping up and down like he was the 6-year-old. Claire was cheering just as loudly, clapping her hands and whistling. When the game ended in a tie, Lily came running over, and this time she ran straight to both of them, not just her dad. Did you see? Did you see my goal? She squealed. That was incredible, Claire said. You're like a soccer superhero. Lily beamed, then surprised everyone, including David, by hugging Claire's leg. It was brief, just a second, but it happened. David's throat tightened with emotion. As they walked toward the parking lot, Claire reached into her bag. Lily, I brought you something. Your dad told me you like dinosaurs, so I thought you might want this. She pulled out a small stuffed velociraptor, not too babyish, but not too mature either. Just right for a 6-year-old who loved dinosaurs. Lily's eyes went wide. For me? For you, Claire confirmed. To celebrate your amazing goal. Lily took the dinosaur carefully, like it was made of glass. She looked at it, then looked at her dad, uncertainty crossing her face. David recognized that look. She wanted to accept it but wasn't sure if she should. It's okay, sweetie, David said gently. Lily hugged the dinosaur to her chest, then looked up at Claire. Thank you. I'm going to name him Spike. That's a perfect name, Claire said. As they reached the cars, Lily did something that made David's heart skip a beat. She reached up and took Claire's hand with her free one. Her other arm still wrapped around Spike, the velociraptor. They walked like that to the car, Lily chattering away about the game, about dinosaurs, about everything and nothing. Claire listened and responded, her hand gently holding Lily's, and David followed behind them. His vision blurring with tears, he tried to blink away. This was what he'd been so afraid of. This moment right here. Because now that it was happening, now that he could see Lily warming up to Claire, the stakes felt impossibly high. If this didn't work out, it wouldn't just be his heart that broke. It would be Lily's too. But as he watched his daughter look up at Claire and smile, really smile, there were risks. But maybe, just maybe, some things were worth being scared for. When they got to the car, Lily turned to Claire. Will you come to my next game? Claire glanced at David, who nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "I'd love to," Claire said. "If that's okay with you." "It's okay with me," Lily said matter-of-factly. "But next time, you should bring snacks. Daddy always forgets the good snacks." Everyone laughed, and the tension broke like a wave hitting the shore. As Claire walked to her car, Lily waved enthusiastically, still clutching Spike. "I like her, Daddy," Lily said as they buckled up. "She's nice. And she gets the dinosaur thing." David started the car, his hands steadier than they'd been all morning. "Yeah, she does, doesn't she?" As they drove home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, Spike tucked under her arm. David glanced in the rearview mirror and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not just hope, but possibility. The possibility that their little family of 2 might grow, that healing didn't mean forgetting, and that love could find you even when you weren't looking for it. 6 months had passed since that first soccer game, and David's life had transformed in ways he never expected. Claire had become a regular presence in their lives, but she'd done it so gradually, so naturally, that it never felt forced or overwhelming. She came to Lily's soccer games, always bringing the good snacks that David forgot. She helped with homework on the evenings, when David had parent-teacher conferences that ran late. She taught Lily how to braid her own hair, something David had struggled with for 3 years and finally had to admit defeat on. But most importantly, she never tried to be something she wasn't. She wasn't trying to replace Katie. She was just Claire. Someone who cared about both of them deeply. Lily had started calling her Miss Claire, a title that felt both respectful and affectionate. It wasn't Mom, and nobody expected it to be, but it was something. A name that belonged to their relationship, whatever that relationship was becoming. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, David had invited Claire over for dinner at their house. Not takeout or restaurant food, but an actual home-cooked meal. Well, home-cooked might be generous. David had spent the afternoon following a recipe for lasagna that he'd found online, and the kitchen looked like a war zone. But he'd done it, and it was currently in the oven, filling the house with smells that were at least promising. Lily was setting the table with the kind of serious concentration she usually reserved for building elaborate dinosaur habitats out of couch cushions. "Daddy, should we use the fancy plates?" she asked, holding up one of the regular dinner plates they used every day. "We don't have fancy plates, sweetie," David reminded her. "We should get fancy plates," Lily said thoughtfully. "For when Miss Claire comes over." David smiled, ruffling her hair. "I think Miss Claire likes our regular plates just fine." The doorbell rang, and Lily dropped the plate on the table with a clatter and ran to the door. David followed, wiping his hands on a towel, suddenly nervous again, which was ridiculous. He'd spent hours with Claire over the past months. But having her in his home, in the space he'd shared with Katie, felt like crossing another invisible line. Claire stood on the porch holding a bouquet of flowers and a bag that David suspected contained dessert. She was wearing a simple dress and cardigan, her hair down around her shoulders. "Hi," she said, smiling at both of them. "Hi," Lily said, grabbing Claire's hand and pulling her inside. "Daddy made lasagna, and he didn't even burn it this time." "This time?" Claire asked, raising an eyebrow at David. "We don't talk about the grilled cheese incident," David said, taking the flowers. "Thank you for these. They're beautiful." Dinner was surprisingly good, even if David did say so himself. They ate at the small kitchen table, Lily chattering about her day at school, about the new dinosaur book the librarian had recommended, about how her friend Tyler had gotten in trouble for bringing a frog to class in his lunchbox. Claire listened to everything, asked questions, laughed at Lily's jokes. She fit into their evening routine like she'd always been there, and David found himself watching her, memorizing the way the light from the kitchen window caught her hair, the sound of her laugh mixing with Lily's. After dinner, Lily wanted to show Claire her room, specifically her extensive dinosaur collection that had taken over most of her available surfaces. David cleaned up the kitchen, listening to their voices drift down the hallway, Lily's excited explanations and Claire's patient responses. When they came back, Lily was carrying 3 of her favorite dinosaur books. Miss Claire said she'd read to me before bed. Is that okay, Daddy? David looked at Claire, who gave him a small, questioning smile. This was another line. Another step forward. Bedtime was their ritual. His and Lily's. It was one of the last pieces he'd held on to, one of the ways he stayed connected to the daily rhythm of being her father. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, at Claire's gentle expression, he realized he didn't want to hold on so tightly anymore. That sounds great, he said. I'll do the dishes. He stood at the sink, washing plates, and listening to the voices from Lily's room. Claire was doing different voices for the dinosaurs, making Lily giggle. He heard his daughter's questions, her commentary on the accuracy of the illustrations, and Claire's patient answers to everything. 20 minutes later, Claire emerged from the hallway, carefully closing Lily's door behind her. She's out, Claire whispered. Made it through 1.5 books before her eyes started closing. That's pretty good. Usually she fights it harder, David said, drying his hands. Thank you for doing that. They moved to the living room, settling on the couch with the tea David had made. The house was quiet now, just the sound of the clock on the wall and the occasional car passing outside. David, can I tell you something? Claire said, setting down her mug. Of course. These past 6 months have been the best of my life, she said, her voice soft but steady. Getting to know you. Getting to know Lily. Becoming part of your lives. But I need to know something. And I need you to be honest with me. David's heart started racing. Okay, where is this going? I know we've been taking things slow. And I understand why. But I'm 32 years old. And I'm not interested in something casual. I care about you. I care about Lily. And I need to know if you see a future here, or if I'm just someone who's filling time until you figure out what you really want. David took a breath, looking at this woman who had somehow found her way into his carefully guarded life. This woman who had been patient when he needed patience, who had understood his grief without trying to fix it, who had won over his daughter without even trying. I'm scared, he admitted. Terrified, actually. Because yes, I see a future. I see you in our lives. Not just for now, but for all the nows that are coming. I see holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays. I see Lily growing up with you in her life. And that scares me because the last time I let myself imagine a future with someone, I lost her. Claire reached for his hand. I can't promise I'll never leave. Life doesn't work that way. And we both know that better than most people. But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere by choice. I'm in this, David. Completely. If you'll have me. David felt tears streaming down his face before he realized he was crying. I want that. God. I want that so much. But what about Katie? I feel like I'm betraying her memory by moving on. David, look at me, Claire said, turning to face him fully. The love you had for Katie doesn't disappear because you're opening your heart to someone else. You're not replacing her. You're making room for something new, while still honoring what you had. And from everything you've told me about her, she sounds like someone who would want you to be happy. David thought about Katie, about the promise he'd made to her in that hospital room, about how she'd made him swear he wouldn't shut down, wouldn't stop living. She would have liked you, he said quietly. She would have approved. Then let her memory bless this instead of haunt it, Claire said. Let yourself be happy without guilt. They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, letting the weight of the conversation settle around them. Then, David spoke again. There's something I want to show you, he said, standing up and walking to the bookshelf. He pulled down a photo album, one he hadn't looked at in over a year. He sat back down next to Claire and opened it. Inside were pictures of Katie, of their wedding, of Lily as a baby. Claire looked at each photo carefully, not with discomfort or jealousy, but with respect. She was beautiful, Claire said softly, and Lily looks just like her. She does, David agreed. I used to avoid looking at these because it hurt too much. But maybe it's time to stop hiding from the past and start including it in the present. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. You're a good man, David. A good father. And you deserve to be happy again. So do you, David said, kissing the top of her head. They stayed like that for a long time, the photo album open on David's lap, the past and present existing together in the same space without conflict. David realized that moving forward didn't mean leaving Katie behind. It meant carrying her with him, along with all the love and lessons she'd given him, while making room for new love, new memories, new possibilities. In her room, Lily slept peacefully. Spike the velociraptor tucked under her arm, and Claire's latest gift, a book about prehistoric marine life, on her nightstand. She was loved. She was safe. And she was learning that families could grow in unexpected ways. David looked at Claire, at this woman who had appeared in his life on a blind date he'd been forced into, whose first words had given him permission to be himself. She hadn't promised to fix his broken pieces. She'd simply offered to walk beside him while he healed them himself. Stay, David said quietly. I mean, it's late. You could take the guest room. If you want, Claire smiled. I'd like that. As they said goodnight in the hallway, David felt something settle in his chest. Not the absence of grief, but the presence of hope alongside it. The understanding that life could be both bittersweet and beautiful, that hearts could break and heal, that love could find you even in the darkest times. Rebecca had been right to force him on that blind date. Claire's first words had changed his life, not because they promised a fairy tale ending, but because they offered something more valuable: understanding, patience, and the permission to move forward without forgetting where he'd been. And that, David thought as he climbed into bed that night, was worth every moment of fear it had taken to get here.